I thought I could control everything. Keep two men in separate worlds, never letting them cross paths, getting the best of both. One was stability, caring, reliable, the kind of man who made me feel safe. The other was passion, risk, adrenaline. With him, I felt alive. Two different poles, two perfect men for two different sides of me. But I didn't know then that every game has an ending. At first, it was easy. Evenings with one, cozy dinners, long talks, future plans. He looked at me like I was his whole world. Nights with the other, stolen moments, kisses that started as playful temptation and ended with my heart racing. I told myself no one would ever know, that I could have it all without consequences. But everything changed in one moment. I was sitting in a cafe with the first when I saw the second outside, looking at me through the glass. My stomach clenched. He knew, he had figured it out. His gaze wasn't angry, just disappointed, and that was somehow worse. I tried to stay calm, but my heartbeat was out of control. He didn't walk in, didn't make a scene, didn't ask questions. He just left. An hour later, a message appeared on my phone. Make a choice. Tomorrow at 8 p.m., the bar, come alone. I knew this was the end. I could keep lying, keep playing the game, but something told me that if I didn't show up, everything would explode. And now here I am, standing outside the bar, hands shaking, feeling nothing but emptiness. They're both inside. I made my choice, but am I ready for the consequences?
By the way, if you're curious about what happened next, subscribe so you don't miss new stories. Thank you.
The moment I stepped inside the bar, the air felt thick with tension. My heart pounded so loudly I thought they could hear it. The dim lighting did little to mask the weight of what was about to happen. They were both there, sitting at separate tables, waiting. I had rehearsed what I would say 100 times, but now, standing between them, words failed me. I took a deep breath and walked toward the one who had sent the message. The one who had caught me. He didn't smile, didn't look surprised, just studied me as if waiting for me to dig my own grave. You showed up, he said, his voice calm but unreadable. I swallowed hard. I had to. The other one, the man who thought he was my only one, was watching from the other side of the room. Confusion flickered across his face. He hadn't realized yet, hadn't put the pieces together, but he would. I sat down across from the man who knew the truth. Just say it, I whispered. Say whatever it is you need to say. He leaned forward, his fingers tapping against the table. How long? I hesitated. Does it matter? His jaw tightened. It does to me. I exhaled. Months. Silence, the kind that weighs on your chest, suffocating. Then, a slow nod, as if he had already known but needed to hear it anyway. From across the room, the other man stood up. He was coming closer. My stomach twisted into knots. He looked between us, confusion giving way to realization. His expression shifted, hurt, anger, disbelief. What's going on? He asked, his voice low, cautious. I opened my mouth, but before I could speak, the man across from me did it for me. She's been seeing both of us. The words dropped like a bomb and the air left my lungs. The betrayal on his face was something I would never forget. He didn't speak, didn't yell, just stared at me as if I was someone he no longer recognized. The silence stretched unbearably before he turned on his heel and walked away. I wanted to call out to stop him, but my voice refused to work. I had thought I would get to choose, that I would be the one in control. But in the end, the choice was made for me. I turned back to the man sitting across from me. He hadn't moved. He just stared, waiting for me to explain, but what was left to say? I had played my game and I had lost. I left the bar in a daze, my mind spiraling as I replayed the look on his face, the silence that cut deeper than any words ever could. The game I thought I had been winning had collapsed in a matter of seconds, and now I was alone. I don't remember how I got home. I barely registered the world around me as I sat on my bed, staring at my reflection in the mirror. My makeup was smudged, my eyes red-rimmed from holding back tears. I had convinced myself that I was in control, that I could manage two lives without consequence. But I had been wrong, and now the wreckage was mine to deal with. The next morning, I woke to a string of messages, some from friends, some from numbers I didn't recognize. The news had spread. People had opinions, judgments. I didn't care about any of it. There was only one message I was looking for, and it never came. Days passed, then a week. He didn't reach out. He had walked away that night, and it seemed he had meant it. The silence was unbearable, but I didn't dare break it. What could I possibly say? That I was sorry, that I hadn't meant to hurt him? None of it would change the truth. And then, just when I had convinced myself that I would never see him again, he showed up at my door. I froze as I opened it, my breath catching at the sight of him. He looked tired, his jaw tense, his hands shoved into his pockets. He didn't ask to come in. He just stood there, staring at me with eyes that once held warmth but now only held questions. Why? His voice was quiet, but the weight of the question was crushing. I swallowed hard. I don't know. He shook his head, exhaling sharply. That's not good enough. I gripped the edge of the door, my nails digging into the wood. I never wanted to hurt you. His laugh was hollow, but you did. The silence stretched between us, thick and heavy. Then, after what felt like an eternity, he sighed, looking past me into the apartment before meeting my gaze again. I don't think I can forgive you. I nodded slowly, my throat tight. I don't expect you to. Another long pause, and then he turned and walked away. I didn't try to stop him this time. The days blurred together after he walked away. I told myself I had expected this, that I had no right to want anything else, but knowing that didn't make it any easier. I tried to move forward, but it felt like I was stuck in place, watching the world continue without me. Every time my phone buzzed, I hoped it would be him. It never was. I threw myself into distractions. Work, gym, meaningless conversations with people who didn't know the mess I had made. At night, I lay awake staring at the ceiling, replaying every moment, wondering if I could have done anything differently. But it didn't matter anymore. I had made my choices, and now I had to live with them. Then one night I saw him again. It wasn't planned. I had gone out with some friends, trying to pretend for a few hours that I wasn't completely unraveling. And there he was, across the bar, talking to someone else. She was beautiful, laughing at something he had said, touching his arm in that familiar way I used to. My stomach twisted, but I forced myself to stay still, to keep my expression blank. I turned away, gripping my drink so hard my fingers ached. I told myself I had no right to be jealous, no right to feel anything at all. But that didn't stop the burning in my chest, the sharp sting of watching him move on while I was still drowning in the mess I had made. A few minutes passed, and I felt someone slide into the seat next to me. I didn't have to look to know who it was. His presence was something I had memorized long ago. He didn't say anything at first, just sat there, close enough that I could feel the warmth of him. "You look good," he finally said, his voice calm, unreadable. I swallowed hard, forcing a smile. "So do you." He studied me for a moment, as if trying to decide whether I was telling the truth. Then he let out a quiet breath, shaking his head. "I didn't think I'd ever see you again." I wasn't sure I'd see you either. The weight of everything that had happened hung between us, unspoken but impossible to ignore. I wanted to ask if he hated me, if he still thought about me, if any part of him missed what we had. But I didn't. Instead, I just sat there, letting the silence stretch, knowing that whatever happened next, the past could never be undone. The silence stretched between us, heavy and suffocating. I could feel his eyes on me, studying every small movement, every breath I took. There was something different about him now, an edge, a guardedness that hadn't been there before, and maybe that was my fault. "Did you ever think about reaching out?" he finally asked, voice quieter than before. I hesitated. "I did, 100 times, but I didn't think you want to hear from me." He exhaled, running a hand through his hair. "I didn't, but that didn't stop me from hoping you would." My chest tightened, and now. He didn't answer right away. Instead, he glanced toward the woman he had been talking to earlier. She was still there, laughing with someone else now, completely unaware of the storm unraveling just a few feet away. "Now, I don't know what I want." I nodded, swallowing down the lump in my throat. "That makes two of us." He let out a small, humorless laugh. "Funny, isn't it, how things fall apart so quickly? One moment everything feels like it makes sense. The next, it's like you never really knew the person at all." I felt the sting of his words deep in my chest. "I never wanted to hurt you." "But you did." I closed my eyes for a second, as if that would somehow block out the truth. "I know." He leaned back in his chair, shaking his head. "So what now? You came here to drink and pretend you're fine, and I came here to try and forget. Neither of us seems to be doing a very good job." I stared at my untouched drink, at the way the condensation slid down the glass. Maybe forgetting isn't the answer. Then what is? He leaned forward slightly, his expression unreadable. I didn't know. I had spent so much time trying to move past this, convincing myself that I could erase what happened, that I could move forward without looking back. But now, sitting here with him, I wasn't so sure anymore. Maybe we talk, maybe we figure it out, or maybe we just stop pretending this didn't happen. He studied me for a long moment, and for the first time in what felt like forever, I saw something flicker behind his guarded expression. Curiosity, uncertainty, something that told me this wasn't over yet. All right, he finally said, let's talk. We talked for hours. At first it was stiff, awkward, two people who had once shared everything now struggling to find the right words. But as the drinks flowed and the walls came down, the conversation shifted. We weren't just talking about the affair anymore. We were talking about everything, about what went wrong, about the moments that had led us here, about the versions of ourselves that we had lost along the way. I used to think I knew you, he admitted at one point, swirling his drink, watching the liquid move like he was afraid to meet my eyes. But maybe I never really did. His words hit harder than I expected. I could say the same about you. He let out a small, dry chuckle. Yeah, I guess that's fair. Silence stretched between us, but it wasn't the painful kind this time. It was contemplative, as if we were both trying to understand if there was still something left here, if anything could be salvaged from the mess we had made. Do you ever wish you never met me? I asked quietly, half afraid of the answer. His eyes finally met mine, and for a long moment he just looked at me. Then, with a sigh, he shook his head. No, I don't, do you? I didn't hesitate, no. We both knew we had hurt each other, that we had done things we couldn't take back. But the idea of erasing it all, pretending it never happened, that wasn't something either of us wanted. The pain was real, but so was the connection. The night stretched on, and at some point we stopped talking. We just sat there, two people tangled in something that wasn't love anymore, but wasn't quite nothing either. And as the bar emptied and the lights dimmed, I realized something. I had spent so much time wondering if I had lost him. But maybe, just maybe, I had lost myself too. And maybe, just maybe, I was finally ready to find out who I was without him. The walk home felt different, lighter, as if the weight I had been carrying for months had finally shifted. I didn't know if what happened tonight changed anything, but for the first time in a long time, I wasn't drowning in regret. The past was still there, still painful, but it wasn't suffocating me anymore. The next morning, I woke up to an empty bed, sunlight streaming through the curtains, and a strange sense of peace settling in my chest. There were no unread messages, no missed calls, no ghosts from the night before clawing at me, just silence. And for once, it didn't feel like punishment, it felt like a new beginning. I spent the next few weeks rebuilding, not just my life, but myself. I let go of the idea that I needed someone else to define me. I focused on work, on friendships I had neglected, on hobbies I had abandoned in the chaos of my double life. I stopped checking my phone, stopped looking over my shoulder, stopped waiting for something or someone to pull me back into the past. And then one evening, just as the sun was setting, I saw him again. Not in a bar, not in some dramatic confrontation, but across the street, walking with someone new. She was laughing, her hand in his, and for a second my chest tightened. But then I let out a slow breath and smiled to myself. He had moved on, and so had I. I turned and walked the other way, feeling lighter with every step. My story with him had ended, but my own story was just beginning. And this time, I wasn't looking back.
Thank you for watching the video. If you want to hear more stories, subscribe to the channel and like the video. Videos are released every day. Good luck to everyone.